Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Finding the Needle in the Haystack, How Vendors Can Turn Data Overload into Business Intelligence for Customers. TBR Principal Analysts, Patrick Heffernan and Geoff Woollacott, and Analysts Jennifer Hamel and Andrew Smith. I'm Justin Sargent and I'll be hosting today's session. Insights from today's presentation are shared from TBR's Business Intelligence Software Customer Research and Business Intelligence Professional Services Customer Research reports. If you'd like to learn more about this research, please reach out to myself or one of the analysts after the presentation. Before we begin, there are a few items I'd like to cover. First, I'll be recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit this channel to watch this presentation or any of the previous presentations we've posted. Second, I'll be following up with all of you via email tomorrow afternoon with the link to today's recording as well as with the slides from today's presentation, so please be on the lookout for that. And finally, we welcome questions on what we're presenting today. Please send any questions you have to the Q&A function, preferably not the chat function, as it's easier for us to sort out on our end here, and we will address as many as we can at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'd like to hand this over to the analyst.
Excellent, thank you. So this is Patrick Heffernan, and I'm the lead in the professional services practice, which for TBR covers everything from management consulting through IT services, through digital marketing services, and it includes business intelligence services. And we also have with us today Geoff Woollacott, who's the head of the applications practice, which covers everything from applications through business intelligence software. And what else, Geoff?
That's about it.
All right, fair enough. And we have Jen Hamel and we have Andrew Smith here, who are the lead analysts in this particular practice around business intelligence. And they're actually going to be doing the majority of the talking today, and Geoff and I are going to weigh in from time to time and actually ask them questions as well as we go along. So what are we covering today? This webinar today is looking at the customer study side or the customer research side of business intelligence. To give you a little background, when we first launched this practice a couple of years ago, we actually went first to the customers and did the survey and got a feel for what they were actually looking for when it comes to analytics and business intelligence software and services. And then we went back to, once we had that in place, we went back to our strength here at TBR, which is looking at the individual vendors. So if you look at the second to last bullet on the left side of the slide, you'll see that what folks really get from our research and what you ought to be able to get out of this webinar today is understanding what opportunities are out there based on both the customer's perception of what they should be getting and what they are getting from their services and software around business intelligence and analytics. And on the other side of that equation is, again, what TBR does well, an assessment of the vendors, who out there is actually providing services and software that the customers want. This is not really a blended webinar in the sense that we're not going to go too deep on the vendor side, but because all the research obviously all gets mixed together, we're not going to be able to help ourselves talking about specific vendors as we go through. And if you do have questions on specific vendors that either we mention or you think we ought to be mentioning, please feel free to chime in and ask. And with that, I think we're going to go right into it, and I'll turn it over to either Andrew or Jen. They just pointed at each other. Go ahead, one of you.
All right, thanks, Patrick. So yeah, we're going to kick off. We're going to go over three major topics during the webinar, which mirror kind of how the customer study is structured overall. So we'll start off with an overview of some of the major findings from the software perspective, including what customers are looking at in terms of budget, some of their challenges, some of their integration priorities, and how that landscape looks moving forward. Then we'll get into kind of the services side of the story, where services players are making the most impact, how customers are leveraging them to really realize the benefits of their BI ecosystems. And then lastly, we'll finish with some of the kind of the major opportunities that we're seeing in the market and how different cohorts of customers across IT and LOB lines are addressing their market needs. So Patrick mentioned this is one piece of research in the BI portfolio, and we do a lot more benchmarking and market sizing in our BI software benchmark and BI services benchmark. So here we have continued tracking across these two deliverables, which helps us come up with our overall BI software market value. It's growing, which shouldn't come as a surprise. We have it marked at $73.6 billion in 2016, and we also forecasted out much farther in our other deliverables. But also, when we asked customers about their budgets, we saw their BI budgets continue to grow, and they marked it at $14.5 million in the first half of 15. And what's interesting is we saw most respondents indicating that they were expanding their BI budget as a net new push. In other words, they weren't reducing spending in other IT areas or in other business areas to supplement an increased BI spend. This was money that, additional money out of their pockets that they're looking to spend on new BI solutions. And then in the report, we dig more into the industry and geographic verticals of how the revenue, how the budgets are playing out. So we saw US and APAC respondents report some of the largest budgets, and then we saw healthcare and finance report some of the highest BI software budgets as well. And TBR breaks out the BI software taxonomy into tools, applications and platforms, and data management and data warehousing. So we saw that the applications and platforms budgets are starting to run away from tools and management a little bit. So for your customers, applications and platforms are where they're looking to spend some of the most money. Now, close to or adjacent to budgets are what customers are looking at for ROI. We've been tracking this, as you can see, for about a year and a half, and we've seen our customer expectations for ROI kind of normalize around the 1 to 2 year range, and then, as you can see from the slide, 80% are in the 2 year or less range in expectations for ROI. Now, there's a couple different aspects to this. I think it's important to note that the relatively short period for ROI in the 1 to 2 year range, I think a lot of new customers who are implementing BI capabilities are really looking for that quick ROI, the quick payback, and injecting data and analytics into a lot of back office functions that are easy wins for them. And those are kind of the foot in the door for a lot of vendors, and then they can build out from that foundation. So I would expect to see kind of more consolidation in the 1 to 2 year range moving forward, but I think as customers really mature their BI offerings and their expectations, we may start to see that more than 2 years bucket grow, and hopefully we'll see the never or ongoing endeavor shrink as customers learn really the value of BI, because this is certainly a high value area that's not going anywhere. Jen, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in there. This is Jen Hamel. I think what's also interesting to note here on the ROI is how respondents define ROI and define the payback on their investment. And what we found, at least on the professional services side, I'm sure this is echoed in the software side, that the preferences for measuring payback were basically split among 3 primary methods: productivity, revenue growth, and total cost of ownership. And those 3 options combined accounted for more than 3/4 of respondents. So I think what's key here is, for vendors, is to focus messaging on how BI can drive top or bottom line performance, rather than using flashier outcomes like enhanced customer insight or things that are more secondary. I think customers with these higher level goals kind of goes along with the kind of longer expectation for actually achieving those goals, because they are broader in scope.
Yeah, and I would supplement that with one more data point, which was when we look at this by industry size, or by company size, organization size, companies with less than 1,000 employees reported a much higher expectation in the 6-month or less category. So small businesses, SMBs, were 20% of them were in that kind of 6-month range. So to your point, it's a lot about messaging to the right group, the right organization, and helping them meet their expectations. So we also dig into kind of the customer challenges, both now and in looking forward. And in terms of the outlook, I think a lot of customers are still struggling with the systems of record application of BI capabilities. So improving performance management, operational efficiencies are kind of taking center stage for customer business challenges, and will be over the next 2 years as well. As you can see, both the improving performance management, operational efficiencies on the slide stays in the top 1, top 2. But then as you can see, risk and compliance is taking quite a jump over the next 2 years, where we saw security as certainly a key factor for all customers. I think risk and compliance plays an even more important role moving forward, as customers not only look to secure more data, but look to secure it across different platforms and across different environments. So really the shift to cloud services, cloud platforms, I think customers see that as a major driver for their risk and compliance needs moving forward, as more and more workloads are migrated across platforms. And so we supplement this with customer external business challenges. So kind of looking at their ecosystem, their industry, what are they most concerned about now, in the future, and over the next 5 years. And so that's where we kind of see data security playing the most pivotal role. That's the #1 concern to customers, because again, they're looking as a competitive advantage. Security is one of the most, really, I mean, you've seen it almost every day now. Major retailers, companies in the news about security breaches. So really, allaying those fears, providing the right products and services to help customers implement and meet those security needs is a #1 priority moving forward. And then I would also add one more thing. We're talking about finding the needle in the haystack here. The ongoing management of increasing amounts of data and data overload was the secondary concern. So securing and then managing are top of mind for customers over the next 5 years. Now we dig in a lot to some specific cloud deployments that customers are using, and kind of tracking the cloud adoption over the past few years as well. As you can see from the numbers here, private cloud adoption is still kind of the way to go for customers. Again, a lot of that plays into the security, risk, and compliance concerns that they're facing. So obviously they'd rather have full control or more control over the data, and be able to kind of own that and deploy it as they see fit. But really looking forward in terms of what customers are evaluating, we're seeing hybrid cloud and private cloud start to pop up, and you can really see the difference between hybrid cloud currently in use and hybrid cloud solutions being evaluated. That the delta there, that change, I think, is a major opportunity for vendors as they hone their hybrid cloud strategy and really help migrate customers from maybe an on-premises or a private cloud deployment and inject public cloud capabilities, and ultimately deliver that kind of hybrid cloud ecosystem that really we're hearing a lot about in the market. Now, shifting kind of to the vendor side of the story, you can see that there's a major battle at the top between some of the marquee vendors in the BI space among customers surveyed. SAP, IBM, Microsoft, Oracle continue to dominate across all 3 of our lines: tools, data management, and applications and platforms. So really, these are when TBR segments the vendor landscape, we talk about multi-line vendors and pure plays. And these multi-line vendors are who we believe are going to continue to lead, especially in the implementation categories, as they can capitalize on broader corporate initiatives like Database 12c, SAP, HANA, Watson. These are the vendors that can provide right now that streamlined, integrated set of technology solutions to customers and services, and really make it ease those implementation challenges and help customers get that 2-year or less ROI that they're looking for. But we also ask customers who they're looking at, which vendors they're considering over the next 12 months, and that paints a different picture because we see the field of competitive entrants and potential disruptors really kind of creeping up underneath these marquee names. So when we ask customers who they're considering to purchase over the next 12 months, Actuate, Salesforce, Word International, DataStax, Good Data, Burst, Datamir, SAS, they were all right underneath the list, and the delta between them and these marquee vendors was much smaller. It was, a 10 to 20 point gap. So we're seeing that continue to close, I think, as a lot of these pure plays start to carve out more of a niche, more of a following, and prove the value of their tools and platforms and applications. So after gauging which vendors are kind of being adopted, we try to dig into what are some of the important factors in evaluation and also some of the measures of satisfaction that customers have and the strengths and weaknesses of how they perceive which vendor they're using and which vendor they're considering. And this slide is pretty telling, especially when we think about the relationship between software tools, applications, and platforms and the services capabilities that kind of really enable customers to unlock that value. And, there it is right at the top. We asked customers what are the important factors in your BI solution evaluation, and they came back 77%, contact with a consultant, advisory, or systems integrator or partner. Were really the enabling factor during their evaluation. So this is, it's everything else, the web searches, industry press, referrals, advertising, it's kind of table stakes at this point where, everybody's providing those capabilities, but really contact with an SI, a consultant, and being able to, I think, shepherd that business value and help the customer make that case for the tools and BI technology they need to implement is really one of, it's not to be overlooked as we move forward. So with that, I'm going to take a break and pass it back to Jen to kind of, continue to build out the services side of the equation.
Sure. Just one last point on this slide. I wanted to note that we've done the survey 3 times, and with each iteration, the percentage of respondents that consider the consulting contact an important factor has been growing. So that contact, that person-to-person, evaluation process is becoming more and more important.
Yeah, this is Geoff speaking. I think what this shows is where we are in the commercialization of analytics. You can argue by taking a look at the trajectory of Watson. We got the consumer and broad-based attention with the Jeopardy competition in, 2010, 2011, that this technology is near commercialization. And then IBM, as have a lot of different people, they've been investing in the assets to come up with these commercialized applications. But they've been largely very academic, very high value in the healthcare space, among others, and they haven't had these commercial use cases that can take to IT buyers concrete, tangible proof points that say, if you do this, you will generate X, Y, or Z, which is why the ROI analysis is so tough. So what's been going on in this market, in my opinion at least, for now, is a lot of these large IT shops have been doing the data rationalization and what do they need to do to transform, tweak, upgrade, enhance the existing on-premises assets, whether they go to a private cloud or whatever they do, but how can they get their existing legacy assets, that legacy investment, analytics ready so that they can truly generate the value. So what you see with these top two things is essentially those IT buyers saying, stop selling me on speeds and feeds and show me how this can work to make a fundamental and profound change in our business. So it's either hearing it from a consultant or the SI, or give me a case study or a success story of somebody in my industry who has done this and actually gotten a tangible benefit from it. And that's why the services piece is so important in terms of doing the advisory and consulting and the things that Jen will be talking about now.
All right, so now that we know, working with a consultant or an SI partner is the most important factor in a customer's decision-making process, on this slide I want to dig a little deeper into buyers' expectations for professional services vendors. So we'll start at sort of the top left corner and work our way around. Our respondents reported that BI programs are most successful when executives buy in. So services vendors that have strong C-level relationships really have the best shot at making a positive impact. Having that, the discussions at the highest level possible in the organization, is really key to making sure that what you're selling is actually implemented in the organization and drives the value that the customer expects. And when it comes to choosing a services vendor, as we see on the right, the top right, customers prioritize value and smooth delivery over any particular expertise. Although we see security rising to the top here of the more competency-based factors. And as we've talked about already, security is top of mind for most analytics customers, so this isn't really a surprise. So to get in the door, vendors should focus their messaging on how they can help customers achieve their desired ROI with minimal business disruption. And as we'll see in a few slides, this is where the software vendors are they're succeeding with bundling software and services into a single package. So rather than leading with an exhaustive list of services capabilities, make sure that messaging is more focused on the customer and what their particular business goals are. But then when we move to the bottom half of the slide, this is where there's a little bit of a disconnect. There's a disconnect between why customers choose a professional services vendor and then what they actually expect in terms of value. So customers know they need help to maximize the value of their analytics investments. And this requires a combination of technical expertise to connect the solution to the right data sources, and then industry expertise to ensure that the solution actually meets the business needs. And these attributes are also among the top areas where customers said that they want their services vendor to improve, which indicates to us that vendors are not delivering on the expectations, even if they may have gone unstated during the vendor selection process. So, in a nutshell, customers are buying for value and price, but without actually defining what that value is, they're not getting what they need. And then finally, the fact that past relationship was the least critical factor in vendor selection shows that customers are less afraid now to make a switch. So continuing to deliver value after closing the sale will be key to turning short-term projects into repeat engagements. And as we'll see on the next slide, the combination of technical and business expertise mirrors the skills that customers are trying to build internally. So this is in our a new thing in our survey. We hadn't asked before, but we've started asking now about skills. Asking respondents, when it comes to analytics programs, what steps are they, what skills do they prioritize, and then what steps are they taking to address them, whether it's hiring, training, internal resources, or outsourcing, or going without the skill entirely. So unsurprisingly, data security is top of mind, and one of the areas where customers are more likely to both hire additional resources and outsource to a third-party provider. So there's opportunities, for services vendors here, even though customers are favoring internal resources. And then business acumen and data integration, they're nearly identical in importance, but customers are actually more likely to hire and train to fill business skill needs, while it's more balanced between hiring and outsourcing for data integration. So So I think here what vendors can take away is they can bring industry-focused consulting and user training to help customers configure and apply BI solutions effectively. So they're augmenting resources, not necessarily replacing them. And then looking at the bottom half of this graph, so it's important to more than 80% of respondents. Customers attach less priority to design and predictive and prescriptive analytics, and thus are more likely to lack those skills. And this suggests, preference to ensure that the core building blocks for analytics are in place before tackling more advanced analytics issues. But in these areas, buyers are actually more likely to seek third-party assistance to fill those skill gaps. So here's another opening for vendors to come in and exceed expectations by bringing both advanced technical skills as well as business acumen.
Yeah.
Oh.
The hot topic.
Yeah, this is Geoff again. What I was going to say with these is if you take a look at the top bars, those are the things where they are going to want to have them and keep that as an in-house function, because those are pure security, and think of it as the crown jewels of the business, the IP, once you've done the algorithms and the analytics output. Now, when you get into predictive design or prescriptive, that could be the kind of thing where they'll either partner or they'll use the automated SaaS subscriptions that are available that will give them that data science in a box kind of thing. In design, I'll be curious as we move forward to look to see how those things shift, because design is all about the user interface as well. And the user interface is being driven back onto IT through the consumerization, because you're doing the systems of engagement. You have to have very sophisticated design for customer retention, but customers also work in IT shops and work with IT for their employees. So they're getting an expectation of what that user experience design ought to be from the consumer side, and they're driving it into IT. So there's a lot of work. SAP, for example, launched at SAP TechEd what they're calling UX as a service to provide that design capability in a very simple, easy-to-digest fashion, because there's far fewer designers for internal IT applications than there are, say, for like Facebook with 40 pages and the designers they have. They'll have about 100 for that. And in internal IT, they may have one designer per 100 programmers. So design is one that I expect to see move up. And then, as I said, the higher up the list, the more likely that's going to be captive or in-house functionality that they'll do. But for services, the bottom ones are where the opportunity would lie.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add and kind of connect the dots on the security discussion. I know we're focused on it a lot, but I think a lot of vendors are going to be asking, where do I add, how do I add value in this during the security conversation, or how do I differentiate myself to customers who are all very concerned and putting a premium on security. And in the report, when we mapped the most important attributes influencing vendor engagement, security and risk, a vendor's ability to display knowledge of a customer's security, risk, and compliance issues was the #1 reason why it was what customers considered critically important to their engagement with a vendor. And then when we mapped that to satisfaction, we saw that security dropped to about the middle of the list. So the point there is customers are, choosing who they engage with, what vendor they engage with based on security, but it's not like they're 100% satisfied with what they're getting. So there's obviously room there for disruption. There's room there for SIs and for partners to really augment and take those capabilities to the next level. There's just a lot of room there to move still. We're not seeing, any one player be dominant in that capability. So continued room for improvement opportunity on the vendor side.
All right, so let's move on to the next slide. With all this build-up about the need for professional services, we can actually start talking about adoption. We're in the past 3 iterations of the survey, we're seeing demand for professional services continuing to grow. Currently now, at least 90% of BI software purchasers are either using or evaluating services in each of the 4 segments that we cover. So similar to the software taxonomy, we break up professional services into 4 main service lines. They're all listed here. We have definitions in the back in case there are questions about how we break up the market. But what we're seeing now is kind of a continuation of trends that we've been tracking since we started the survey, in that consulting remains the primary entry point to BI services engagements, which is not a surprise since there's still a lot of uncertainty out there about how to get into BI and how to make it work for a particular business problem. But we're also seeing that other service lines are catching up quickly, and we think this is driven by earlier advisory engagements that have now, where vendors have been able to cross-sell other service lines. And just one point I wanted to make, if you were with us for the webinar in April, I mentioned that seasonality may be a factor in the dip in usage in the second half of 14, and the 1H15 results appear to confirm this, in that short-term projects tend to occur in the first half of the year, so we see higher levels of adoption in the first half, and then more evaluation consideration as customers are planning for the next year in the second half.
The Thanksgiving effect?
The Thanksgiving, yes. So another interesting finding on ADM, applications development and maintenance, the adoption and evaluation of that service line is increasing from the customer perspective, yet in our BI professional services benchmark, we're seeing revenue growth from ADM slowing. And we've attributed this to the pressure to deliver quick ROI from BI, driving demand for prepackaged and cloud-delivered solutions, which is eroding, custom development opportunities. And then the other, kind of impact there being automation and pricing pressure on the maintenance side. So, from that you would think, oh, the opportunity in ADM is declining, but we're seeing clearly that, interest in custom development is still heavy on the customer side. So it's an integral competency that vendors have to be able to deliver end-to-end professional services. So, we mentioned earlier some opportunities for vendors to address skill gaps, design and predictive and prescriptive analytics being some of the main areas. So this is an area where vendors can come in and fill those gaps and drive ADM revenue. So to close off the professional services discussion, let's look at the leaders. IBM, no surprise, remains the vendor of choice, with more than 1/3 of respondents buying at least one service line from IBM. This aligns with our benchmark research, where IBM stands out as the revenue leader. So, we attribute this to their solutions-focused approach. Geoff had mentioned Watson before. They're really coming together now with more industry-focused solutions that combine both consulting and advanced analytics platforms, and keeping business outcomes at the forefront of their messaging. So this is clearly resonating with customers and has become the standard to which C&SI vendors are aspiring. But for the C&SI vendors, the field still remains too fragmented for any one of them to rise to the top, although Accenture and Capgemini have come the closest, consistently across the iterations of the survey. And then SAP, Microsoft, Oracle, similar to the software survey, they hold the next 3 spots. And we think this reflects the preference of buyers for bundled software and services. So the software sale and the vendor throws in add-on professional services. And the fact that value and price is top of mind for vendor selection for professional services, that is another sort of explanation there. So C&SI vendors have a much higher bar to cross to establish added value and gain mind share in BI professional services. But we think that industry expertise and guidance around best practices, as well as ongoing support, are areas where these vendors have the best chance of overcoming that pull of the bundled software and services, which may be cheaper for the customer, but as we've seen, is not delivering the value that customers have come to expect from analytics. So the key to C&SI vendor success will be forming strategic alliances with software vendors to both become the go-to reference for professional services engagements, and then also building industry-specific deployment frameworks and IP on top of those analytics platforms to differentiate from their competitors. And again, Accenture and Capgemini, and increasingly the India-centric vendors are finding success with this approach already. Now I'll turn it back over to Geoff.
All right. And we were on the last slide. I'm like, I'm not supposed to talk on this one. Now, what we have in here is taking a look. There's a standard categorization we use about IT buyers, and we'll go from the bottom to the top. When we think of own and control, we're thinking of a very traditional kind of legacy shop where they want to have everything, dropped on the dock, and they'll wire it up and run it and be in total control, total charge of the installation, sort of your typical on-premise environment. The next one is builder results, where they would go out, they'd use an SI for some guidance, perhaps do it from reference architectures, buy some pre-built converged or hyper-converged systems and pre-baked software and load it up. And they were using some of the pieces coming from the outside. And then the last one is where we think we're migrating towards of the outcome buyer. They'll do everything as a service. They won't have any internal IT shop to speak of, and they'll be out on the public cloud that's secure and safe, and everything's fine. I mean, that sort of is the way that we look at it. Now, I'm going to jump, and we'll probably jump back and forth. Go back for a second. All right. So take a look. You see 24, 44, and 32. So now you jump. Where are they going to be in 2 years? It's 31, 34, 36. So the builder results goes down, and the other two go up. So what you can see here is I was talking earlier where some of these firms are doing the data rationalization and the data standardization of what kind of analytics platform are we going to move to. So they realize they haven't got the skills necessarily to get that done, but they want the transfer of those skills. So they're in the builder results, expecting to come back down to own and control once they've had the outside consulting advice, guidance, and counsel to get this thing stitched up, retrain their internal IT employees, and then they're going to take it back into own and control. Others, however, are in the builder results mode now to kind of get it ready so that they can truly get into a true hybrid cloud environment and move the way that all the different analyst firms talk about it, is this idea that everything's going to the hybrid cloud. But a funny thing happened on the way to that nirvana, as IBM learned with Bluemix, is some of these people wanted it on-prem. They wanted that own and control. So Bluemix Local wasn't a strategic initiative. It was much more of a reactive initiative to the way the customers wanted it. The customers were not ready necessarily to topple it all over to a public cloud environment, and they had to offer it in this on-prem flavor. So over the next 2 to 3 years, we'll be watching to see how much of those in the build of the results column revert back to own and control or flip out to the outcome buyer space. But this was one that I thought was particularly interesting in terms of this, the one in the middle is kind of that bridge network. Are they going to go all the way over to a true hybrid cloud, lights out, all you are for internal IT is an orchestration layer and a brokering for the metering and billing, or are they going to bring it back in and have total control over it themselves?
All right, so finally we try and bring it back to a little customer orientation from a more traditional IT versus LOB perspective. This is drawn out in the report too. We see some very different preferences for both buyer types, and then we also break down kind of which function between IT and business are involved in what part of the purchase process, who plays the major role in both the scoping, purchasing, and then implementation of BI products. And we, as you might expect, we see a lot of involvement from the business on the scoping and the continued use of the products, while you see more of an IT influence on the implementation, the continued update, and kind of the education of users on whatever the BI tool, application, or platform may be. So the point of this analysis here and in the report is to kind of help orient vendors to the fact that you're dealing with two classes of decision makers, two distinct priorities of two distinct segments of customers when you're marketing and implementing BI solutions, and it goes back to some of the success factors that customers are finding, where you have clear business strategy laid out beforehand, clear integration capabilities and data management provided along with the solution, really kind of go a long way for satisfying the needs of both of these groups.
Excellent. So here's the taxonomy, and we're actually going to leave that up there for a minute because it's a perfect segue into some of the questions that have been coming in as we've been making this presentation. And I'd encourage everybody now, if you got something that's on your mind, type it into that Q&A function and we'll address it. The first one I want to get to is the question that came in: what is the relationship between business intelligence as discussed here and big data? Is one a subset of the other? Do they intersect? And I'm going to let Jen or Andrew, I'm going to let Andrew take the stab at the full answer, but my initial thought is you've actually uncovered one of the challenges we have with this entire set of research, in that it's called business intelligence in order to capture the largest span, or in order to go as broad as possible into everything that's out there. But oftentimes in the marketplace, it's perceived as either analytics or it's perceived as big data. There are different little subsets of it. We use business intelligence as a large catch-all term. Big data is certainly part of it. But I think going forward, we're going to have to refine the way that we talk about this particular space to better reflect what's actually happening out in the marketplace. Geoff, Andrew, Jen, anything else on that?
Yeah, this is Geoff speaking. The name, we recognize and acknowledge the name BI is an older generation reference point. But when we were using it, what we didn't like about just calling it big data and analytics is, where's the insight? Where's the call to action? Where's the business value? That's intelligence. We're probably going to wind up renaming this, maybe putting the word insights in there, because when we're talking business intelligence, we're not talking the 20-year-old BI systems. We're talking about the idea that at the end of the day, you only invest in this if you can extract some business value or gain a new insight in order to move the needle, either in growing your revenue or cutting your costs. So big data and analytics without a business action plan that falls out of it is just it's a mental exercise with no true business value.
Yeah, and I would click on to the next slide. This, which kind of details our software taxonomy. So this gives you a better idea of kind of how we're thinking about the different solutions that go into a big data platform or a big data solution, and then how we are trying to break out the taxonomy. There certainly isn't a one-to-one mapping in terms of big data and what percentage of that is tools, what percentage of that is management platforms. I think that's kind of a different exercise, but this is kind of how we help break down those different segments and segment what customers are looking to buy and from whom.
Excellent. So the next question that came in is, are there case studies or examples of business intelligence trends within financial services industries? Again, I'll let the rest of the panel talk after I talk first. And what I'll say is that that's exactly the kind of thing that we use these benchmarks and this customer research to go after. This provides, both the services vendor and the software vendor benchmarks provide a foundational set of analysis and research and data that we can then go deeper on based on our clients' needs, based on what is driving the market. That's true on the customer side too. So oftentimes we collect and we have some insights around different case studies, different examples by industry, by geo, by a particular solution or a service set. And what we do then is we go much deeper based on the needs that based on the key intelligence questions that we get from our clients. Any other thoughts on examples out there?
Well, this is Geoff, one of the ones I was going to bring up. It was a small firm that IBM acquired, I believe it was in 2012, called Algorithmics. It's a UK-based financial services industry algorithm designed for the stress testing of portfolios. And in the briefing I received on it, those many years ago, so it's some of the facts may be missing in my recollection here. But what this was being used for was banks were using it to check on the portfolio stress test, the various credit ratios from the various financial legislations, LIBOR 2, I believe it's what it's called over in Europe, and ours is Dodd-Frank, all the changes that came in after the various banking meltdowns we had in 08 and 09. And what I found curious about it, as it was explained to me during the briefing, is both the Federal Reserve and the major banks are using this tool to do their algorithm tests on the portfolios and the liabilities and the risk that's associated within the portfolio, but the feds were using a different set of ways to test it rather than the banks, and they weren't sharing it back and forth to one another. So this was a tool both for the regulation and compliance, and then also for major firms that may have multiple investments. It was a way to take a look at the total portfolio of the company in a single snapshot view to determine how much more or less you should lend them based on the makeup of their leverage and their investment portfolio, or I'll call it loan portfolio.
All right, excellent. We have another question here that says, is there a way to see the trends in the responses over the years that you have been doing in these surveys? You mentioned consulting becoming more important, but can you provide that trend line or change over time? I know, Justin, if we go back a couple slides, let me see which one it is. Set it up a second ago. Look at slide 13. So on some of the data that we provided here, and obviously is in the customer study itself, shows year by year the different work that we've done. In other cases, what we're doing is we're presenting that snapshot, and that sometimes that depends on whether or not we have been consistently. Well, obviously we refine the questions that we're asking. We refine what we go after based on the data that comes in. But I think there are probably some areas where we could probably, like you mentioned, Jen, you mentioned consulting has grown in importance over time. Is that something that we could actually provide?
You mean as far as adoption?
Yeah, as far as as far as the no, I mean the consulting as importance of for why vendors pick a particular, what they're looking for. They're looking for that relationship with the consultant. That you said had changed over time. Can we provide that sort of look? So
as far as the evaluation of BI solutions, the importance of the consulting vendor relationship has changed over time.
Right.
As far as in vendor selection, I think the way that we ask the question is really more about, you know, what do they have expertise in? Is it technical expertise or industry expertise? So it's a little bit more granular than overall consulting capability, but it's certainly areas that, you know, we do cover in the main study. Yeah. And another thing that we do is looking at particular groups of vendors. So this is something in the BI benchmark that we do as well. We segment vendors in the market into, you know, are they software-centric, hardware-centric, or C&SI-led? And in the study, what we're able to do is figure out, okay, maybe, you know, without going into the individual vendor level, why do customers choose a particular type of vendor? And so we did see some differences as far as criteria for vendor selection that we dig into in their full report.
Okay. I think that, so that question probably sort of highlights that what we're showing here is a snapshot of actually two reports, the services and the software customer research. So, I mean, when we sort of boil it down and put it into a webinar for an hour, we lose a little bit of the depth that's obviously in the report itself. And then we can actually go through and kind of on demand pull out different strands as needed. Okay. So another question that came in, the industry as a whole is moving towards a digital self-service based go-to-market and consumption model where customers are the end business users, outcome buyers. How do you reconcile that with the customers valuing a contact with a consultant advisor most highly? That is an excellent question, and it's a softball right to Geoff Woollacott.
Well, what I think is going on there is the idea that IT cannot let shadow IT get into this because it's the corporate data set. So there needs to be some consistency there. Number one. Number two is it's pervasive throughout the industry. It doesn't matter what analyst event I'm at. They're talking about the scarcity of the data scientist and the need to make quote unquote consumable analytics, meaning essentially putting the pretty picture graphical user interface around it to allow drag and drop data science capability for the business analyst or the line exec, line manager. So I believe the whole idea is you're getting into the digital self-service consumption model, no disagreement with that, but in order to get it on the recommended list for an IT shop that is moving into that outcome buyer model where what IT's role will be more as a cloud broker of various pre-approved services, and then the orchestration and management layer. That's why infrastructure management's all kind of in flux based on the fact that it needs new technologies within infrastructure management, because it's not dispatching the flying screwdriver to swap a board. It's really just sliding applications over and scaling up and new instances of containers and so on and so forth as the scale comes. So there's still the need to come into IT. As I said, you know, not to repeat myself, they got to get their data set. They got to get the data cleared and mined, know how they're going to store it, what kind of file structure they're going to use for it, what databases they're going to bet on, be it Hadoop, HANA in memory, go with Watson Cognitive, you know, where are they going to go? That's a big bet that will have, that's a decades-long investment that they're going to make. This is a big transformation cycle. It'll move faster because with this transformation cycle, we're stepping into the systems of engagement and the digital business streams. So it will accelerate the transformation, where in the older cycles I've lived through in my 30 years in the industry, it was swapping one system of record for another. So it was a slower roll. There wasn't as much compelling argument to retire that technical debt. So where they are now is getting those proof points to say, yes, we're going to go whole hog, move from a TCO look to an ROI look, and we're going to transform the on-prem or the, you know, the titled assets, IT assets, so we can take advantage of all this. So it still has to have IT input on what's going to be the architectural design for the IT shop of the future. And will they go building outcomes, or are they just getting some advice and counsel to revert back to own and control?
You went into that in depth in that commentary recently, published, what, last month? 2 months ago?
Well, I did one on containers. Yeah.
On containers, yeah, but
yeah.
It captures that whole thing.
It captures a piece of this. I mean, IT is in the middle of a massive reorganization in itself. As we're reorganizing as suppliers to end customers, our business models, our go-to-market, our technology offers. So as we're trying to figure out how to sell differently into IT, IT is sitting there trying to fit, well, IT and enterprise is sitting there on the other side of the bargaining table, uncertain of how they want to consume it. So we're trying to figure out how to sell it and monetize it as profit pools are shifting from analog dollars to digital pennies. And on the other side of the table, they're trying to figure out how they want to consume it.
Excellent. Well, I think we have time for one more question, and maybe we should send out that paper to everybody, along with Justin, when you send out the link and all to the audio recording, send out a copy of that paper.
We also have a prospectus on new research. I can tack that in too.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I think just because I think it was a great question, and it really, a lot of what you said I know was capturing that as well. So we have one more question, and that is, high touch with, and this actually gets back to sort of what you were getting into, Geoff. High touch with consultants and industry expertise is important, so shouldn't the C&SI vendors be leading in this? Jen, is it?
So I guess the way I'd respond to that is I think that they are leading, but there's so many of them that no one vendor is really rising to the top as far as, you know, from the customer side. But we are seeing, you know, increasing interest, you know, in looking at more C&SI vendors for professional services. When, like Andrew had mentioned before, when we ask about vendors that are being considered, the C&SI vendors are rising to the top.
Okay.
Yeah, and sorry we're kind of jumping around here, but Justin, could you go to slide 22? Because we kind of were jumping around, but the point I wanted to make before we get off, I need to plug this, is that kind of the way that we approach the portfolio, you know, someone had asked about case studies before. We don't necessarily show in-depth case studies in the body of the customer study, but what we do each quarter is break out customers and ask a specific segment of them about a specific market or a specific use case to try and do that type of case study analysis. So this half of the year, we did IoT and connected devices. So you'll see us kind of dig into the IoT side of the BI story how that is affecting customers and what customers want, and that'll be released by TBR in the next couple of months. So I just wanted to make sure we got that out.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Sorry, I forgot to bring that up. That's really, yeah. And that actually reflects, I mean, a lot of this is ongoing, so, you know, we're analysts. We go after those key intelligence questions that either our clients or the market points us towards, and that's why IoT is popped up.
And if, you know, questions now in the chat, questions reaching out to us, you know, we're always looking for, like Patrick said, that, you know, how to add more value. So if there's different case study type deep dives we can do, we tailor these little modules every quarter to kind of what we think are some of the most important customer and vendor pain points, and we're happy to hear your feedback.
Yeah, definitely. That is a perfect way to sum it all up. We're happy to hear your feedback. Yeah, Justin, take it away.
All right, well, I'd like to thank our analysts presenting today, and thank you everyone for taking your time to join us today for today's presentation. You can follow our analysts as well as TBR on Twitter, at their handles listed here, and please check out our pages on SlideShare and YouTube for our previously aired webinars. I do want to remind everyone I will be following up with you all tomorrow via email with the slides from today's recording, the link, and with Geoff's report that Patrick mentioned earlier. So before you sign off, I'd like to ask you to take a very brief survey on today's webinar. We're always looking to improve both the information we provide and how we provide it to you. So your feedback would be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, we'll leave the chat function open for another minute or so for people to send in any last-minute questions or comments. And thanks for joining, and have a good afternoon.